Hi there and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name's Richard. I'm sitting at the Santee Cooper KMNI airport, runway 20, ready to take off. And I'm going to take off right away and explain what I'm doing en route. So here we go. Brake is off, power's going up, and taking off. Okay, passing 40 knots, 50, 60 knots, pulling the nose up, in the air, nose on the horizon, and I want to put on the heading hold and altitude vertical speed hold. I'm going to look down, see that the vertical speed down here is 8. I want it to be 10, so I'm going to move it up to 10. Oops, the other direction. Airspeed is 85 to 90 knots. That's good. Okay. So I'm going to, now that we're stable on autopilot, what I'm going to do next is explain what we're doing. So I want to fly from the Santee Cooper Airport and an ILS into Charleston, South Carolina. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at the charts. So here's the Charleston ILS runway 15, and we have a VOR of 113.5, a localizer of 109.7, and an inbound course of 154, outbound being 334. And so here we are at right here, Manning Santee Cooper Regional Airport. We're taking off on runway 20, and we're going to just fly runway heading until we intercept this 154 radial off of Charleston. And we'll probably intercept it about a 25 miles out, and then we're going to intercept the radial 334, and then when we go close enough to see and hear the ILS, we'll intercept the ILS. Okay. So for this flight, I'm climbing to 4,500 feet. 4,500 feet is even number plus 500, which is what you want to fly for a westerly heading VFR. Since we're heading 200, we need to fly at 4,500 feet. So we're getting up to 3,000 and going to 4,500. And as you can see right here, I can make that a little bit bigger here. So I'm on radial 350, and we're going to get to 354, which is the radial that we want. And we'll watch the distance we are out when we intercept. Okay. Coming up at 3,400 feet, going to 4,500 feet. Airspeed is dropping a little bit below 80. So I'm going to come down here and change this 10 to 9, and maybe even 8. Okay, so that airspeed stays around 80. As you climb, you have to adjust your vertical speed to hold the airspeed that you want. So 3,900 going to 4,500. Okay, getting ready to level off and pull the power back. So I'm going to start slowly lowering the vertical speed from 8 to 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay, it's about 4,500 feet. Pulling the power back to about 2,000 RPM, and that should give us about 90 knots. Okay, now it's just a matter of watching and waiting for the intercept. Let's see. I think the first thing I'm going to do, rather than using the vertical speed here to hold, I'm going to hold 3,500 with the altitude hold rather than vertical speed hold. So I'm going to click the ALT button here, and airspeed's a little low. I want maybe 2,100. I'm trying to hold about 85 to 90 knots here. Okay, we'll do that. So as we get a little closer, we're watching the radial here. We're on 347, and it's going to climb up to 354. So as it gets a little closer to 354, what I'm going to do is use the NAV button rather than the heading hold to intercept that radial. Now, the way I like to do it, maybe it's not the only way to do it, you can just hit the NAV button, and I'll demonstrate that for you in a few minutes. So what you have to do, though, for this to work is you have to have the heading hold over to 154, and the VOR course arrow here should be at 154. So let's look at the VOR course arrow. I believe that's 154. And but now the heading bug is still on 200. So I've discovered several ways to do this, but the way I like to do it is just to turn off. We're nice and stable. We're going to turn off the autopilot and then change the heading bug to 154, and then turn the nav button back on. So here we go. So let's see. Yeah, we're close enough. And this is going to change where we do the intercept, I'm fairly certain. Let's see here. Okay, autopilot is now off. I'm going to change the heading bug over to 154. Let me blow this up and get to 1554. Right there's 154. Okay, we'll go back to here and hit the nav button and the altitude hold. And you can see I'm turning already. And that's good old George doing the intercept that he likes. So I was just doing runway heading. It had gotten me there about the same time. But looks like George is going to take a little shortcut. I like to call the autopilot George. So airspeed's a little high, going to pull it back. I want to get between 90 knots and 80 knots. So I'm going to pull the power back to about 2,100 again. All right, so now you'll see that my backup frequency for the primary VOR is 109.7, and that is the localizer going into Charleston. And the secondary VOR2 or NAV2 is already dialed into 109.7, and we can't see it yet. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn NAV2 on to listen to. First off, I'll turn NAV1 on, and hopefully you can hear the Morse code. Okay, that's the Morse code for Charleston. Now I'm going to turn on NAV2, and you won't hear anything because we don't have NAV2 locked in yet. But what that's going to do is I won't have to pay too much attention to this, because as soon as I hear NAV2 start giving me its Morse code, I know we're within range and locked on. Okay, that looks good. So we are now at 341 radial. Going to the 354 radial. Why is that going down? That's a good question. Why isn't it going up to... Oh, I'm sorry. I misspoke. This radio is going to go to 334, not 354. The opposite of 154. Let's go back to the chart. So the opposite of 154 is 334. So that means that the radial is going to count down to 334. And as it does, since George is in control, and you see the indicator on VOR1 here is coming down to 334 or inbound 154. I believe as we get there, we'll get to, at this heading, I think we'll get to intercept the localizer about the same time we get to the 154 or the 334 radial. We'll see. So generally, I've flown this before. When the distance reads about 22 nautical miles, there we will get to hear the localizer click in. In other words, this VOR2 localizer will lock on. Now, during this approach, you have to have something that tells you where you are on the approach. There's two things I do for that. This is the NDB, and I'll go back to the chart. So there's an NDB right here, Ashley. It's frequency 329, and that's the final approach fix. So I do have, I'll come over here, I do have 329 locked in on this frequency, and that's pointing to the final approach fix. So the ADF dial is pointing to the final approach fix. Okay. So it looks like it's going to be a tie. We're going to start turning to 334 pretty soon. And George will take care of that. Good old Autopilot George knows exactly what he's doing, I hope. So at 4,500 feet, and as we make the turn, I believe we will get the localizer locked on. And so I'm going to stay at 4,500 feet because I'm now flying the ILS, and I don't have to worry about the altitude for that. The approach plate says the minimum is 1600, the maximum isn't defined. Once we're on the localizer, we're defined, and here we go. Okay, so 335 going to 334 on the radio, and we'll watch for the heading to change. And it's going to be close. So what's George going to do? Okay, there's the VOR, the localizer. See it going? Okay, that's the localizer's Morse code, and it's coming across. And I'm going to turn the localizer Morse code off. Now, if I switch to the frequency here, let me come back up here. So I'm going to do this, bring the frequency down, and put the 109.7 in. Okay. So 109.7, and now George will turn in the other direction to intercept the localizer. So now he's got a about a 30-degree intercept to the localizer. Airspeed's fine at 85, altitude is good, and we shall see. Okay, now that that's locked in, I'm going to turn on the approach button. Okay, so I want it to fly the approach, and hitting the approach button, it also gives me the glide slope as well. So the altitude button will stay locked on to the 4,500 feet that I'm flying, but when the glide slope starts dropping, the altitude will turn off, and the glide slope will be controlling the altitude. Okay, localizer's getting closer. We're probably a good ways. Note up here that the glide slope, there's no barber pole indicator, so the glide slope is being received, and this is telling me the localizer is being received with a 2 button, and that has a 2 button. So VOR1, VOR2 both locked on the localizer. VOR1 has the glide slope, VOR2 does not. And we're looking good. Airspeed of 85, altitude of 4,500, and we're getting right on the localizer. And now I can use this down here. I'm at 17 miles out, 17.5 right there, 17.4 right there, miles out, and that's the initial approach fix. I'll go back to the chart. Okay, so I can turn this map off. We don't need it now. So Luther right here at 17 miles out is where we are. We don't have to do a procedure turn because we're coming straight in. Okay, localizer is coming down. I mean, the glide slope is starting to come down. That means I need to be ready to pull the power back. I'm going to pull the power back a little bit anyways, because when I On the glide slope, I like to have one click of flaps in. So airspeed is 80. Watch the flap lever down here. I'm going to put one click of flaps in. There we go. That's going to change the airspeed and so forth. So I'm going to pull the power up to hold about 75, right about there. I'll have to reduce the power as the glide slope starts kicking in. So what I'm watching for now is for George to start a descent. When this gets level, when this indicator on VOR1 here gets level, we're on the glide slope, and we'll watch George put in about a 400 to 500 foot per minute rate of descent. And when he does that, I'll have to pull the power back to maintain about a 75 knots of airspeed with one click of flaps down. Obviously, the gear is 3 down and welded. Airspeed's a little high, pulling the power back a little bit. And the airspeed's high because George has started his descent. So it's time to pull the power back even more. And we'll find a power setting that holds 75. There's 75. Touch of power in a little bit more. I want to keep it between 70 and 75 there. Now you'll hear a couple of things coming up. You'll hear the final approach fix, the outer marker, and that'll happen at about 6 miles out in that range. And you'll see the ADF dial start to flop. Okay, airspeed up, just run low, power up just slightly to hold 70 to 75. Okay, airspeed's looking better, altitude is coming down, and let's look at the minimums for the approach. Okay, so at about the final approach fix, we'll be around 1,600 feet, maybe slightly lower than that. The minimums for the ILS 15 is 243. I'll round that off and say 250, which is 201. And so at a minimum, I will switch to manual flying before 300 feet on the altimeter. But what that really means, power back a little bit, airspeed's a little high. Okay, so what that really means is I will put in my second click of flaps before I turn off the autopilot. That just allows the autopilot to retrim the aircraft. And I'll probably do that about 500 or 600 feet. And so sometimes you can't resist when you're under the hood to look outside. So I'm going to look outside here. Oh, look, there's a runway. How about that? Okay, we're still a ways out. So airspeed is a little high, pulling the power back a little bit more. George is doing a fantastic job here of keeping on the localizer and on the glide slope. You want to use George in real world conditions, weather conditions, if you're trying to shoot to the minimums. You should also practice this approach manually without George. So just to make sure if there's something wrong, George didn't show up for work today, you will be able to do it on your own. It's good practice. Okay, airspeed 75, vertical speed at about 450 there, feet per minute on course on glide path. So we're at 3,000 feet, going down to probably 600 feet is when I'll look out again. There is an outer marker in the middle. I'm sorry, there's the outer marker, the middle marker, and the inner marker. So we'll hear the outer marker at about 6 miles, the inner marker about, the middle marker probably around less than a mile, and then the inner marker is probably about 300 feet. So we'll listen for those. Okay, airspeed's good at 75, on course on glide path, looking good. And you can see down here too that the glide slope is in control and the altitude disappeared when we intercepted the glide path. So we're on NAV, we're on the, this says NAV is in control, meaning the VOR or ILS at this point is in control. We're flying an approach, and that's why the glide slope is on. Okay. Checking once again, 1 click of flaps. Gear is 3 down and welded, and airspeed 75, coming on in. Okay. Distance from the airport, according to the Garmin, is 7.5 miles, and we'll be getting close to the outer marker here. So other than doing our normal cross check of airspeed, altitude, power, and vertical descent, I'll throw in the fact that we're going to watch at this arrow on the ADF dial to start to flop. And it might start to flop before we hit the outer marker. We'll see. Now we'll probably hear the outer marker before it starts to actually flop. I don't remember exactly which goes first. We'll find out. Okay. Okay, passing 1,700 feet, and in the 700-foot range, there goes the outer marker. Okay, outer marker is here, and there goes the ADF arrow flopping. Airspeed's a little high, I'm going to pull it back. Okay, so we've passed the outer marker. Airspeed back down below 75. Now, one of the things that you have to do is time when you want to put your second click of flaps in. You want to do that early enough so that the aircraft can stabilize on both airspeed and remain on the glide slope. And if I were really shooting an approach in the weather, I'd start looking out at about 1,000 feet above the ground, based on what the weather forecast is. If it was less than that, if you're trying to shoot an approach down around 500, down to minimums of 300 to 500 feet, good luck to you. I do it all the time, if you know how to practice it, but which is fun to do, even in real airplanes or in the simulator here. Okay, so we got an airspeed of about 70, And we'll do a quick look outside, and there's the runway coming in. Okay, I'll leave the view like that. So airspeed's a little high, which is fine because I'm going to go ahead now and put the second click of flaps down. Okay, changes the angle and adding a bit of power to hold about 70 knots. Okay, so everything looking good. If I take this view, I can still see my altitude, my airspeed, everything looking good. And I'll be ready around. Okay, so I've got back to the other view. Okay, 2 clicks of flaps are in. Airspeed, altitude looks good. And 500 feet. There's 500 feet. And I'm going to go ahead and take it now. I'm slightly off. So I'm going to take it now off of autopilot and fly it on in. Okay, autopilot is off. Doing a slight course correction. Keeping the descent going. Pulling the power back slightly. Here I can be 65 and be just good, fine with the airspeed. Airspeed 70. I'll be crossing the threshold soon. Airspeed coming down to 65. Okay. Alright, crossing the threshold, pulling power back to idle, going to the chase view. A little bit of a balloon there. Alright. A little aerodynamic braking, putting the nose down, going back to the front view here, and rolling out. Okay, I can actually put on the brakes and turn here probably. I think I will. So off the runway, here we go. And if you've not been to Charleston before, it's a really nice airport. There's the Charleston Tower, and we're going to pull the power back to idle and stop right here. Okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. It was a lot of fun for me. I hope it was very instructive for you. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more videos.